Near future. The Earth is in crisis, a series of ecological disasters and overpopulation. The authorities have decided to close the borders, giving each country a year to implement a population reduction project. Soon masked individuals carrying bodies out of homes became the norm. Bob heads the Department of Citizen Strategy. This time, as always, the deceased's relatives received money in an envelope. In general, people's deaths have become part of the routine. It is a way to regulate the planet's population. Individuals can leave this life painlessly and voluntarily, and in return, their loved ones receive a large sum of money. Fierce debates over the moral and ethical aspects of this method continue to this day. Now the authorities are concerned that there are not enough volunteers, even though the Athenian agreements mandate that Earth's population be reduced by at least 20%. Charles York, once a popular journalist and news anchor, has been contemplating this for a long time. His wife Dawn Kim is preparing dinner, as all of Charles's children will be arriving soon. Rachel, Charles's daughter and CEO of a major pharmaceutical company, is currently going through a difficult lawsuit. The medications produced by her company cause dangerous side effects in patients, yet Rachel still refused to withdraw them from the market. Jared York is a politician who supports the population reduction program, unlike his ex-wife Beth. She wonders what her husband would say if their 10-year-old son, Lucas, declared one day that he intended to opt for euthanasia. Yes, a bill is currently under consideration that proposes including minors in the program. Seeing Dawn preparing vegetables, Jared was surprised. Vegetables are now a great luxury, accessible to only a few, and storing them in such quantities at home is prohibited. Upon learning that his adoptive brother Noah would be at the dinner, Jared was not pleased. Today Charles plans to tell his children something important. Despite the risk of receiving an excessive dose of ultraviolet radiation, he removed the protective film from the window. Rachel arrived with her daughter, Mia. Charles reminded her that this was supposed to be an adults-only dinner, but it seemed plans would have to change. Noah, holding a sunshade umbrella, felt very nervous about seeing his family and called his girlfriend Grace for support, and he received it. Grace was sure that Noah's father, despite everything that had happened, was no longer angry. Noah was about to abandon the idea of attending the family dinner, but his sister Ashley disrupted his plans by offering him a ride in her car. After all, she wasn't going to suffer alone at the family gathering. Neither of them knew why their father had called them all together. Upon discovering that her brother had a girlfriend, Ashley asked for details. Noah said they met at an anonymous support group. He believed today was not the right moment to talk to their father about it. Ashley and Noah joined the others. Charles noted that his adoptive son looked well and embraced him. Dawn invited everyone to the table, serving her signature dish. She once had her own restaurant. Charles raised a toast, saying how sorry he was that his career had kept him from spending much time with his family. But now he was happy that they were all together. Everyone was curious, why had Charles and Dawn gathered them? They announced their intention to undergo voluntary euthanasia. This news was a shock to everyone at the table. Rachel ordered her daughter Mia to leave, as this was not a conversation for her ears. Of course Charles and Dawn weren't doing this for the money. Charles explained that after all those years of anchoring the evening news, not a week had gone by without him reporting some kind of ecological disaster. This made Charles feel guilty for having 4 children while the planet desperately needed population reduction. Moreover, it was known that the government was preparing a project for mandatory euthanasia. When asked why Dawn wanted this, she explained that since they were both public figures, they could set a good example. But Ashley didn't believe in her father and stepmother's selflessness, thinking they just wanted to elevate the York family name with their actions. Noah agreed with his sister, unable to understand how their father could be so selfish. Dawn firmly stated that they would continue the discussion after dessert. Charles and Dawn were far from the first married couple to choose joint voluntary euthanasia. Noah was convinced that the government was lying to the people. According to official statistics, only 9% of the population had volunteered, but in reality the number was much higher. Jared declared that this was complete nonsense and that the government would never falsify statistics. In his opinion, the voluntary euthanasia program was a good thing, as it not only provided financial compensation but also numerous benefits for the relatives of the volunteers. Charles no longer wanted to listen to this, noting that the same kind of people Jared was now so passionately defending had once denied climate change on his news broadcasts. Everyone kept arguing, each insisting on their own position. At some point Ashley let slip that Noah was dating an addict. Noah explained that Grace had overcome her addiction 10 years ago. Charles asked his son to show him a photo of Grace. He found her attractive and said how wonderful it was to find love. Everything went much better than Noah had expected. While browsing social media, Mia saw commenters calling her mother evil. Charles found a note from Dawn, who had changed her mind at the last moment. It was a shock to everyone present that Charles and Dawn had already submitted the application and that euthanasia was scheduled for today. There was a knock on the door. It was Bob, who had arrived earlier than expected. Jokingly, he asked if he could come in or if the procedure would take place right on the doorstep. However, no one appreciated his sense of humor. Bob apologized for the inappropriate joke, explaining that due to his workload, he worked almost without days off. Bob was invited inside. He rarely visited such wealthy homes, which was not surprising. After all, rich people had no reason to become volunteers. Charles explained that his wife had gotten cold feet at the last moment and asked Bob to come another time. Charles was confident that he would be able to persuade Dawn. Bob said that was not a problem, but to postpone the procedure, Charles needed to fill out some paperwork. Charles preferred to review the terms first. Bob had no objections. While Charles read, refusing to believe his own eyes, Bob stated that he was a big fan of Charles, as were many others, but their opinion of him might change if certain things came to light. After reading the contract, Charles indignantly declared that he would not sign it. Meanwhile, his family members waited in the kitchen. Charles came out to them, looking extremely frightened. He had decided to go through with euthanasia today, just as originally planned. His children did not understand why. He had wanted to do it together with Dawn. Charles explained his decision by saying that he did not want to impose his opinion on Dawn if she no longer wanted it. He regretted not being a better father to his children, especially after their mother passed away. The inheritance would be divided equally among them all. Charles gave his children his final advice: to remain a family and support each other. Bob administered anesthesia to Charles so that he would fall asleep and feel nothing. Then Bob injected the main drug into the catheter. Thus Charles peacefully and painlessly passed away. His body was taken away. Bob expressed his condolences. Ashley told him to leave, but Bob explained that he could not go without a second body. If Dawn had refused, someone else had to take her place. When Charles's children tried to drive Bob away, his men entered the house with weapons. Bob stated that they had 2 hours to decide who would take Dawn's place. Jared wanted to call his influential friends in the administration, but it was impossible, because the Department of Citizen Strategy was jamming all signals. Nothing should distract them from their current task. Since Mia was underage, she did not count, at least not until the government passed the relevant bill. Private organizations like the Department of Citizen Strategy were paid per body count, so they had no intention of leaving until the contract conditions were met. Bob insisted that Mia wait in the car for now. She should not see what was about to happen here. Dawn was already being searched for, but the chances of finding her within 2 hours were slim, and Bob was not about to reduce their daily quota. Refusing euthanasia was possible, but in that case all their accounts would be frozen, their property confiscated, and they themselves thrown in prison. But the worst part was that their names would end up on the so-called list of cowards who turned their backs on the country in its time of need, the very thing Charles had feared most. Jared tried to negotiate with Bob, who as the leader of his team, had the authority to decide how to handle the rules. But Bob did not need anyone telling him how to do his job. The rules were the same for everyone. Additionally, the organization has a dossier on every client, compiled based on their phone conversations and messages. For example, Bob knows that a year ago, Jared divorced his wife for young Kaylee. However, Bob is also aware that Kaylee is cheating on Jared with 5 men at the same time. It is also known that Jared's son, Lucas, hates his father and hopes that he will volunteer. Rachel doesn't need anyone to read her dossier to her. She already knows everything about herself. Her daughter is being bullied at school because of her, the board of directors wants to fire her, and she might even be facing prison time. Rachel made it clear to Bob that she is not afraid of him. After leaving the rest of the dossiers for the family members to read on their own, Bob decided to leave, reminding them that if they didn't choose the volunteer within 2 hours, the choice would be made for them. As Bob had said, all signals were being jammed, there was no way to even access the internet. Checking the father's email on his computer, Ashley came across a message confirming a bank transfer. While members of the organization ensured that no one left the house, Bob offered Mia to play cards. As instructed, each of the York stayed in a separate room to reflect on their lives and decide whether they were worthy of continuing to live. Ashley had always dreamed of becoming an actress but had not passed a single audition, which had pushed her to the brink of despair. Rachel was less emotional. She was used to accepting everything with cold composure. Jared's world collapsed. It turned out that the government he had been defending was lying to its citizens. Then everyone gathered for discussion. Jared believed that Noah should sacrifice himself for all of them because he had always been a burden to their family. When their parents adopted Noah, he had every opportunity available to him, yet he ended up abusing substances and even hitting a woman with his car. Ashley on the other hand thought that Jared should take Dawn's place because even his own son hated him. Noah reminded his brother and sisters of their father's last wish, to stick together. But Rachel wanted nothing to do with a father who had essentially condemned one of them to death. So what should they do? Who was less worthy of living than the others? Soon Bob was informed that the Yorks were ready to make a decision. But in reality they had not decided anything and instead asked how exactly Bob would choose for them if it came to that. Bob stated that he would use a lottery. Unexpectedly Rachel asked whether it was important for Bob to carry out euthanasia specifically, or if he simply needed a body. Bob replied that the first option was preferable, but they could negotiate. While Bob was away, Mia tore up his playing cards. Like the rest of them, Rachel was not ready to part with her life. To be honest, they weren't even a real family. That's why Rachel decided that if Bob needed a second body, it would be anyone but her. With those words, Rachel holding a knife attacked Noah but only managed to wound him. Rachel believed that Noah was the least deserving of their father's money, especially since he wasn't even their blood relative. Jared agreed with his sister, and all that remained was to convince Ashley. Rachel started arguing that if they got rid of Noah, their shares of their father's inheritance would be bigger, which could help Ashley fulfill her dream of becoming an actress. In the end, Ashley betrayed Noah, revealing to everyone that he had already received his share. Their father had paid off the family of the woman Noah had hit so they wouldn't take him to court. They all collectively attacked Noah, but he wasn't going down without a fight, defending himself as best as he could. A fierce, uneven fight broke out. Bob knew that Mia had been conceived via IVF because her mother hadn't wanted to waste her time on men. The girl only snapped back in response. Bob was informed that Dawn Kim had been found and was ready to proceed with euthanasia. Despite Dawn's wish to do it at home, Bob ordered that she be taken to the central office. Noah managed to fight off his brother and sisters. Right now, more than anything in the world, he wants to hear Grace's voice. Bob made popcorn for Mia, but she kept making sarcastic remarks, demanding answers about what was happening in the house. Bob replied that based on his experience, they were hunting each other down. Not wanting to hear any more about how her mother was probably the mastermind behind all this madness, Mia tried to escape. Meanwhile, Noah was trying to come to terms with his family's betrayal. Ashley came to him, saying how sorry she was, but Rachel had practically hypnotized her. According to her, Jared and Rachel had taken knives and were waiting in the living room. Noah intended to speak openly with his brother and sister, hoping to change their minds. Ashley went with him. When Noah was distracted, Rachel and Jared attacked him from behind. Noah begged Ashley to help him, but she simply ran away. Rachel and Jared chased Noah all over the house, but luck seemed to be on his side. First he severely wounded Rachel with a fork, then he struck Jared. However, Noah never expected Ashley to sneak up behind him and knock him out. Bob explained to Mia that he wasn't a villain, he was saving this planet. Someone had to do it, even if Mia might not understand that yet because of her age. Bob's wife, Ruth, had also left voluntarily after growing tired of a long struggle with a serious illness. She didn't want to die for nothing, she wanted to provide for her family. Noah's brother and sisters tied him up and were about to finish him off together, realizing that Bob wouldn't do it for them. He was clearly enjoying the spectacle. But before they could, they heard Grace's voice. She had become worried because Noah wasn't answering her calls and had come over, breaking curfew. The sisters and brother went outside, asking Grace for help. She was recording everything on her phone. Bob urged her to calm down, explaining that they were acting within a government program. Taking advantage of the distraction, Mia tried to escape but was caught. When Grace ran for help, Bob ordered his man to shoot. Noah heard the shot. Grace's body didn't count, so Bob ordered the others back inside to finish what they had started. Rachel advised her siblings not to think, just to do it. Besides, Noah had probably lost his will to live after losing the love of his life. Jared agreed, as did Ashley. But by that time Noah had managed to free himself from the ropes. Armed with kitchen utensils, they searched the house for Noah, insisting that they had nothing to do with what had happened to Grace. But they didn't have to search for long. Noah came out to them himself and attacked them one by one. Noah decided that Ashley deserved to live the least because she was a liar. Rachel tried to convince him to stop, asking him to think about what their father would have said. Rachel was ready to take on the role of the volunteer, realizing that she was the worst of them all. She was cold and selfish. However, Jared also agreed to become the volunteer, admitting that he was a terrible brother, father and husband. Ashley also agreed to euthanasia, realizing that a two-faced failure like her was of no use to anyone. Noah declared that none of them would sacrifice themselves. It might seem like they had no choice right now, but there was always a choice. Mia begged Bob to let her see her loved ones because someone she loved wouldn't make it out of the house alive. The girl wanted to say goodbye. But Bob only laughed in response. Ashley's wounds were too deep, and her siblings tried to give her first aid. Time was up, so Bob entered the house. Seeing Ashley lying lifeless on the floor, He commented that it was an unexpected choice. Bob thanked the others for sparing him the trouble of dragging the equipment here. The reward would be split equally among them. But in reality Ashley was alive. This was a cunning plan to take Bob and his men hostage. At some point Ashley lost consciousness from her numerous wounds. To prevent Bob from escaping, Jared knocked him out. When Bob came to, a catheter had been inserted into his vein. The former hostages were preparing to euthanize him. They had nothing left to lose, and Ashley hadn't survived. Terrified by his impending death, Bob offered them a deal, admitting that they were holding Dawn in the central office. This meant Bob could have prevented all the horrors that had happened in this house. Noah was determined to finish what had been started, and Bob screamed that he was simply cleansing the planet of biological waste. That was his job. What would Noah do? In the next scene, we see him playing the piano. His entire family came to the concert. Jared, by the way, had mended his relationship with his son, and Dawn had returned safe and sound. The official version stated that the volunteers were Grace and Ashley, who had supposedly been friends for many years and had decided to leave together to inspire others. Bob gave an interview about it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.